Hello there. Welcome to the Light Story Club. Settle in and find a comfy spot to relax. Before we get to the story, I would love to know your favorite myths and monsters. Comment where in the world you are and let's begin the story. There are dreams inside the ocean, deep, velvet dreams that sway with the tide and hum lullabies no mortal ears will ever hear. I remember being one of those dreams. Before I had breath or thought, I was a shimmer in the waves. The sea knew me before I knew myself. She whispered to the wind and wrapped me in her glistening arms, calling me daughter even before I was born. I didn't fall from the sky or burst into the world with fire like some of the others. I arrived gently, with foam crowning my curls and pearls catching in the corners of my lashes. I remember sunlight touching me like a kiss. The first thing I felt wasn't cold or fear, but warmth, radiating from above, wrapping me in gold as if the sky itself adored me. I opened my eyes and saw clouds like distant ships, sailing slowly, and I thought I could follow them forever. I rose from the sea, cradled by a great scallop shell, the edges pink and iridescent like morning light. The waves lifted me slowly, singing in a tongue older than time. I did not understand the words then, but I do now. They were singing of beauty, of love, of me. Birds gathered, wings flickering like living lace, circling the sky above. Doves, mostly my ever-faithful companions. They cooed and fluttered, landing gently on the shell beside me. One even perched on my shoulder, as if it had always known me, as if it had waited for this moment forever. And the winds. Oh, how they played with my hair, lifting strands like silk ribbons. They carried my scent far and wide, a mixture of salt, flowers, and something else I couldn't name then. Something warm and golden. Something that made things bloom. I drifted toward land, and the sea followed me like a loyal friend. The foam clung to my ankles, glittering like stardust. Seashells opened like smiles wherever I stepped, and the sand sighed beneath my feet. Cyprus was the first land to greet me. She cradled me with green hills and orange blossoms, kissed my skin with warm sun, and offered olive groves for shade. I wandered there for days, or maybe years. Time felt soft and dreamy, like waves over the shore. In Cyprus, I learned to move. I danced to the rhythm of the earth, slow and swaying. I stretched out beneath fig trees and let butterflies land on my fingers. I listened to the hum of bees and the rustle of petals. The island breathed with me, and I breathed with her. I didn't speak, not at first. But I didn't need to. Flowers turned to me when I passed. Fawns walked from the woods to rest at my feet. The moon came closer at night, curious and pale, and the stars blinked more brightly when I looked up. When I began to hum, just softly, as I walked, the world answered. Petals opened. Springs bubbled from stones. Lovers found each other in gardens. Birds sang sweeter. It was then I began to realize what I was. I wasn't just a girl born of foam. I was something more. One evening, the sea brought me a gift, a polished mirror of obsidian, dark as night but clear as glass. I gazed into it and saw eyes the color of the horizon, hair like sunlight laced with sea spray, lips curved in wonder. I did not know my name, not yet, but I knew the mirror was telling me a truth. I was beautiful, but not just in face or form. There was something inside me. Something that warmed the space between hearts, something that made life lean toward me like flowers to light. I didn't know how to name it yet, but it sparkled in my chest like stardust caught in a heartbeat. Still, I was alone. The island sang to me, and the sea wrapped around me, but there were no others like me yet. No gods. No mortals. No one to speak to, no hand to hold. Just the doves and the waves. But even in solitude, I was not lonely. Not really. Because love was already growing inside me, blooming like the wild roses of Cyprus, thornless and open. I began to whisper to the sky, to the breeze, to the little fishes. I whispered wishes, gentle and slow, for someone to speak with, for stories to share, for voices to echo beside mine. And one day, as the tide rolled in with a deeper hush, the wind answered. "My daughter," it said, "the world is ready for you now." And with that, I turned toward the sky, heart rising with the doves, and stepped forward into the next part of the dream. The morning I first heard the garden call my name, the sky was the color of ripe peaches. I was lying in a field of clover near the shore, my toes buried in the warm sand, when I felt it, a tug, not on my body, but on my spirit. A soft pull, like a dream trying to draw me back in. But I was already awake. The wind stirred, more purposeful than usual, and carried a scent I had never smelled before. Not salt, not flower, not sun. It was sweeter, lush and rich, like figs and honey melting in the warmth. My heart fluttered. My fingers curled. And I followed. The path took me through olive trees, their silver-green leaves shimmering like tiny coins. Birds chirped above me, invisible but close, as if they too were being led by the same invisible thread. My doves flew ahead, wings bright against the dawn. Even the butterflies seemed to guide me, flickering like petals blown by unseen breath. That's when I found it. A garden not planted by mortal hands, not grown by seasons alone. It was tucked between hills, hidden like a secret too beautiful to speak aloud. The air itself hummed with the sound of soft harps and slow, contented sighs. As I stepped into it, the grass bent gently beneath my feet, as if the earth was welcoming me home. The trees in this garden were strange and wonderful. One bore golden apples that shimmered like they were dipped in sunlight. Another wept blue blossoms into a crystal-clear pond. Vines curled lazily across marble columns, their leaves tracing out soft, green poetry on pale stone. Everywhere, roses bloomed in every shade, pink, white, red so deep it was almost black. I pressed my hand to a tree trunk, and it pulsed beneath my palm, alive and listening. "Who made this?" I whispered. And the garden answered, not with words, but with warmth. The petals lifted toward me. The apples glowed more brightly. A breeze coiled around my neck like a necklace, fragrant and familiar. The garden had been waiting for me. In its heart stood a pool, still and shining like moonlight on silk. I leaned over it, expecting my reflection, but instead, I saw flickers of other faces. Smiling ones, sad ones, hands reaching, lips brushing, eyes closing in peace. Love, blooming in 1,000 different forms, danced across the surface. I sat by the pool and watched. I watched all day, until the stars blinked above like sleepy guardians. The garden did not grow dark, not really. It glowed with a gentle light, as if it breathed its own dusk. And in that moment, I understood. This was no ordinary place. This was mine, not a possession, a connection. The garden was my heart, given shape and soil. Here, love would always have a home. Here, stories would always begin. The world didn't know me yet, but it would. And when it did, when people spoke my name in whispers and songs, their hearts would dream of this place, even if they never saw it. The next morning, the garden gave me a gift. From the pond rose a swan, feathers like falling snow, eyes as clear as morning. It bowed its neck and swam to the shore, offering me a wreath of sea flowers strung together by threads of golden kelp. I placed it on my head and felt my chest fill with quiet strength. I stayed in the garden for a while, days or weeks, I don't know. Time there was soft, like silk slipping through fingers. I named the trees. I braided flower crowns for the stones. I sang, and the vines danced. Eventually, I knew I had to leave, just for a little while. There were others out there now. I could feel them, other immortals stirring, stretching, blinking open their timeless eyes. I was not alone in the world anymore. And while the garden would always wait for me, I longed to meet the ones who shared this great woven story of existence. The garden did not protest. As I walked away, its flowers leaned toward me one last time, and the pond gave me one last shimmer of light. A farewell kiss. And when I looked back, the path I had walked had disappeared. The garden was hidden once more, tucked into the earth like a treasured jewel. But I knew where it was, and it knew where I would go. I had wandered through dreams and sunlight. I had danced with the sea and bloomed with the garden, but I had never stood in the presence of another like me. Until now. The air grew brighter as I stepped through the folds of cloud, up and up, where the wind was sharp with divinity and stars shimmered even in daylight. Olympus. That was its name, though I had not heard it spoken. It was more a feeling than a place, part palace, part breath, part lightning caught in stone. I arrived barefoot, hair tangled with seashells and petals, my skin kissed by the sea breeze. I did not wear robes like the others. I hadn't needed to. But I felt them watching me as I entered, gods and goddesses whose names had already begun to echo through the world. They were so grand, so polished, like jewels carved from ancient time. Zeus stood tall, wrapped in thunder, his eyes like storm clouds heavy with power. Hera beside him, regal, sharp, beautiful in a different way. Not soft like sea foam. She held herself like a queen born of flame. Athena watched me carefully, her eyes calculating beneath the silver of her helm. Apollo smiled faintly, golden like the sun, but with a knowing edge. Artemis tilted her head, already retreating into shadow. And ours, oh, ours. He was all muscle and motion, a lion pacing beneath his skin. His gaze on me was less curiosity, more confusion, like he couldn't decide if I was a song or a storm. I stood in the middle of them, glowing, though I did not mean to. The warmth in my chest, my love, my essence, shimmered out of me like sunlight on water. And it made them pause. No one spoke at first. Then Hermes, ever the quick one, broke the silence. "Where did she come from?" he asked, grinning. "She smells like roses and lightning." Zeus turned toward me, his voice deep enough to roll mountains. "You are Aphrodite," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," I answered. The sea gave me breath. The sky gave me light. There was a murmur. Hera's gaze narrowed, as if measuring me for something unseen. "We didn't summon you," she said. "I wasn't summoned," I replied gently. "I simply am." Another hush. My words echoed like a harp string in the wind. Then, from behind me, laughter. Sweet, low, amused. It came from Dionysus, reclining on a stone bench draped in ivy and grapes. He raised a goblet and toasted the air. "She's the breeze between heartbeats," he said. "Let her be." Zeus nodded slowly. "Then you are welcome." That was all. No thunder, no fanfare. But I didn't need them. I walked among them with bare feet and a steady heart. In the days that followed, I watched them. I listened. They argued and plotted, played their games of power and pride. Some of them created laws. Some built weapons. Some painted the sky with stars or danced in shadows. I did none of those things. Instead, I sat beside the fountains, and soon they began to visit me. Not for counsel or strategy, but for something softer. They came when their hearts were heavy or curious, when they had questions they couldn't quite name. Athena once asked me why mortals weep when they fall in love. Artemis wanted to know why the moon seemed lonelier when she was near certain forests. Even Hera, after some time, sat beside me and watched the doves with a silence that said more than words. And ours, He visited most of all. He never said why. He would sit nearby, arms crossed, eyes sharp. He claimed he didn't believe in softness. That love was a distraction. But his gaze always lingered longer than it should. He brought me wildflowers once. Said they were for no one in particular. I smiled and thanked him. He never brought them again, but he stayed longer each time. The immortals had strength, wisdom, cunning, radiance, but they didn't quite understand what I was. Not yet. They saw the petals. They hadn't seen the roots. One day, as I stood at the edge of the mountain, looking down on the world, I saw something stirring. Mortals. Tiny, flickering, fragile things. They built fires and sang into the night. They carved names into bark. They offered trinkets to the stars, hoping someone might hear. I heard. Their hearts glowed like mine, and I knew. It was time to descend. The first time I stepped into the mortal world, the sky was blushing with dawn. I chose to descend not in a thunderclap or flash of divine fire, but on the breeze, soft and scented with orange blossoms. I wrapped myself in a robe of sea silk, woven by the waves, and walked barefoot upon the earth. No one noticed me at first. That was how I wanted it. I wandered through meadows and vineyards, through sleepy villages still stirring from their dreams. Dogs barked lazily. Smoke curled from chimneys. And from every home, I felt it love, even if only a flicker. A mother humming as she stirred a pot. A child clutching a carved doll. A man whispering to a tree, carving a name into the bark as though it might answer back. So much love, and yet so much fear, too. Fear of loss. Of rejection. Of being seen and not chosen. I felt it all as if it were a song vibrating through my ribs. In a quiet orchard, I found an old couple harvesting olives. Their hands were gnarled like the trees they tended, but their movements mirrored each other perfectly, like dancers who had practiced the same steps for a lifetime. I watched them from the shadows, smiling. They didn't see me, not really, but the woman paused, looking toward me with a soft frown, as if sensing something. She nudged her husband. "Do you smell flowers?" she asked. He sniffed the air. No more than usual. But she didn't stop looking. "It feels peaceful all of a sudden." She pressed a hand to her chest and smiled. Not at me, but toward the breeze. I left a blossom on their doorstep. That was the first time I gave a blessing. The days that followed felt like floating. I didn't walk so much as drift. Wherever I went, something changed, just slightly. Colors felt warmer. People laughed more freely. Lovers dared to speak the words they were too frightened to say the day before. I didn't always intervene. Sometimes, I just watched. A shepherd sang to the sky, thinking no one listened. A girl tied a ribbon around a statue, whispering a wish into the wind. A boy carved a necklace from driftwood, then buried it at the edge of the sea, afraid it was too much to give. And always, I left something behind. A shell. A blush of rose on the cheek. A warm breeze at dusk. The mortals began to speak of me, though they had never seen me clearly. They called me Lady of the Flowers, the heart's flame, the shimmering one. They built tiny altars of petals and honey, leaving offerings in the hollow of trees or by the riverbanks. I was touched, not flattered. Moved. Their hearts reached like vines toward warmth, desperate for connection, for meaning, for beauty. And then I found a boy crying beneath a fig tree. He was young, perhaps 16, and he clutched a withered garland in his lap. She didn't come, he whispered to no one. She said she would. He pressed the flowers to his chest and sobbed, shoulders shaking. I knelt beside him, though he couldn't see me. I reached out and brushed his cheek, just barely, with my fingertips. And the wind lifted. A new garland bloomed where the old one had faded, vines twining with fresh lavender and roses. The boy gasped and looked around, startled. He touched the blossoms in awe. "A gift," he murmured. "Not from the girl. From me." He stood slowly, steadied by something he couldn't name, and walked back toward the village, the garland held to his chest. I watched him go. Then I sat beneath the fig tree until night fell, and the stars came blinking awake, one by one. There is a kind of magic in mortal hearts. It's not eternal, like ours. It flickers. It fails. But when it burns brighter than anything I've ever known. That night, I whispered to the stars, "I will protect this. I will nurture it." Because love was more than kisses and roses. It was a promise, and I was its guardian. Love is not always gentle. I learned that in a village nestled between two green hills, where the sun rose late and the wind liked to linger. The people there were kind, and their laughter was like honey poured over bread. I stayed longer than usual, drawn to the warmth of their days and the sweetness of their dreams. There was a weaver named Thalos who caught my attention. He spun thread finer than spider silk and dyed it in shades no one had names for. Colors that lived between sunset and blush, between dusk and wine. He never raised his voice, never frowned. His hands danced over the loom with such care, I thought he must be full of love. And he was. But not the simple kind. His heart belonged to a girl named Aelia. She was a potter's daughter, with strong arms and a laugh that shook the walls. Her cheeks were always dusted with clay, and her smile, oh, it was crooked in the loveliest way. They had grown up together, played by the river, shared bread when times were lean. Everyone in the village knew they belonged together. Everyone but Aelia. She loved someone else, a traveler who had passed through the village only once, leaving behind a carved wooden ring and 1,000 whispered promises. He had told her she was a star fallen from the sky. And when he left, he didn't look back. But she still waited. Every morning she stood by the road, just for a moment, just long enough to hope. And Thalos watched her wait. He never said a word. He just wove. Day after day, his threads grew darker. His cloths took on the shades of bruises and smoke. He no longer smiled when Aelia walked by. But he still brought her firewood in the winter. Still left figs at her door. That kind of love hurts. It is the love that asks nothing and gives everything. The love that waits, even when it knows the answer. One afternoon, I sat beside Thalos as he worked, unseen. I watched his hands tremble over the loom. "She does not love me," he said quietly, though no one was around. I did not answer. Not with words. Instead, I breathed gently, and the thread on his loom shimmered. He looked down, startled, and saw that the dark cloth had begun to gleam with a faint gold, as if light had found a way through the sorrow. He blinked and wept. That night, he did something brave. He went to Aelia's house and handed her a shawl made from that very cloth. "I made this for you," he said. "Not because I hope. Not because I wait. But because I love you. And I always will. Whether you return it or not." Aelia stood there, silent. Then, softly, she took the shawl. She didn't fall into his arms. She didn't change her heart. But she pressed her forehead to his for a moment, and whispered, "Thank you." That was all. And it was enough. Thalos smiled again after that. Not every day, but some. And when he wove, the threads no longer clung to sorrow. They danced with grace, colored by truth. I left that village the next morning. A dove circled above as I walked, and I knew it was time to move on. But I carried something with me, something heavy and quiet. Because I had seen that love, too, can ache. That it can break a heart not out of cruelty, but out of silence. Out of mismatched longing. It wasn't something I could fix with flowers or charms, but I could honor it. There are many kinds of love, and not all of them end in embraces or vows. Some end in tears and goodbyes. Some bloom for a season and fade gently into memory, but all of them, every one, deserves to be seen. That is my vow. To witness, to bless, to never turn away from the fire, even when it burns beneath the rose. After I left the village of Thalos and Aelia, I wandered for days through olive groves and fields of lavender. My heart ached with a quiet that didn't sting, not quite. It pulsed gently, like an old song I couldn't stop humming. I had seen so many hearts already. Brave, bruised, beating in silence, and I needed to breathe. So I went to the mountains. Up high, the air was thin and cold, but clear. The clouds hung low like curtains of wool, and the pine trees whispered their own secrets. I walked until even the birds grew quiet, until the sky stretched pale and enormous above me. And there, nestled between two snowy ridges, I found a lake. It was still as glass, untouched by wind, cradled by stone. The water was deep and so perfectly still that when I knelt beside it, I saw myself not as a reflection, but as if another me stared back from beneath the surface. She looked tired. Not in the way mortals look tired, but in the way stars dim before dawn. A quiet fatigue settled beneath my skin like soft ash. I had spent so long pouring love outward into gardens, into hearts, into unseen spaces, that I had forgotten what it felt like to hold it for myself. So I stayed. Days passed, or maybe only hours. Time was gentle there, like the ripples on the lake when a pine cone dropped from above. I didn't speak. I didn't bless. I didn't search for lovers or weave garlands in the grass. I simply was. And that was when the dreams began. Each night I dreamed of versions of myself, ones I'd never met. One was a child, made of mist and giggles. One was older, cloaked in silk and crowned with stars. Another danced with wings of flame, her laughter wild and free. Each one shimmered at the edge of sleep, each one looked into my eyes, and each one whispered the same thing: do not forget. I asked them, quietly, forget what? But they only smiled. One morning, I woke to find my doves had built a nest near the water. Their soft coos echoed like lullabies. They had brought me small gifts: a pearl, a petal, a golden thread. I understood. They were reminding me of myself. Not the goddess others saw. Not the songs sung in my name. But the being born from sea and sky, from foam and flame. The one who simply loved, even before anyone knew what love was. I stood and walked into the lake. The water was icy, but it welcomed me. It wrapped around my legs, then my waist, then my shoulders, like a memory. I let it rise until I floated, weightless, my eyes on the sky. And I remembered. I remembered laughter that didn't need an audience. Dancing with no reason. Kissing the wind. Hugging myself after long dreams. I remembered that love was not just something I gave, it was something I am. I stayed in that water until the sun blinked over the ridge and touched my face with gold. And when I stepped out, I felt full again. Not with noise or gifts or worship, but with stillness. With self. I dried in the sun and braided my hair with reeds. My skin smelled of pine and memory. I looked again into the lake. This time, the reflection smiled. As I left the mountains, I carried no garlands, no offerings. Only a small stone I'd found beside the lake, smooth, warm, heart-shaped by time. Some loves are quiet. Some loves grow only in silence. And some must begin within. After my time in the mountains, I descended into a valley stitched with orchards and vineyards. The earth here was soft and sweet, and the people, laughed as if laughter was a kind of fruit they shared at every meal. I arrived just before their midsummer festival. Colorful ribbons were tied from tree to tree. Lanterns were strung between houses. The air smelled of peaches, honey, and wild herbs. Children ran barefoot, their faces smudged with berry juice and joy. And in the center of the village square, a great wooden stage was being built, its beams humming with excitement. They called it the Festival of Many Hearts. Not for lovers alone, but for everyone. For friends, for family, for strangers who had only just met. There was something precious in that. Love not narrowed, but opened wide. Like a bowl passed around the table, filled and refilled. I stayed at the edge of the festivities at first, watching. A boy gave a flower crown to his elderly neighbor. Two sisters braided each other's hair while telling stories so loudly they forgot the ending. A girl carved small hearts into apricots and left them on every doorstep she passed. No one knew I was there, and yet, perhaps they did. On the morning of the festival, I wandered through the village square. Everywhere, colors swirled. Cloth of red and pink and coral hung like waterfalls from balconies. Laughter clanged like bells. Musicians tuned their lyres, and dancers rehearsed beneath olive trees. But what caught my attention most was the Wall of Wishes. It stood tall at the far end of the square, made from wood and linen, covered in slips of parchment. Each one pinned with care. I stepped closer and read a few. I hope my sister finds her voice. I wish my father would forgive himself. I want to be brave enough to tell her. There was no greed in these wishes. No demands for riches or power. Just hearts speaking softly, like seeds whispered into the soil. I touched the wall and closed my eyes. And in that moment, a soft breeze wound through the village. The lanterns swayed. The children looked up, blinking. And for a moment, the whole village paused. They didn't know why, but suddenly, everyone turned to someone beside them and smiled. That night, the festival began. There was music and dancing, of course, but also stories. Hundreds of them. People told tales of kindnesses done in secret, of lost letters, of loves that had passed and those that had never begun. Each story lit a little candle within the listeners, and by the time the moon was high, the village glowed from within. I sat beside the bonfire, unseen but present, a crown of woven clover resting on my head. The villagers danced in circles, hand in hand, strangers and friends alike. And I realized something. Love doesn't always need a grand gesture. Sometimes, love is found in the way someone refills your cup without asking. In the way they laugh a little louder just to make you feel braver. In the way a whole village can become a family, just for one night. Before I left, I slipped a parchment onto the Wall of Wishes. It read, "May you never forget that your heart was made to connect." The wind carried the words upward, like smoke. And the village dreamed that night of doves, of blossoms, of light footsteps in the grass. Not all places welcome me. Some hearts, when they feel love near, do not open, they clench. Like fists. Like vines tangled too tightly around their own stems. I felt such a place on the edge of a dark forest, where the trees seemed to bend away from the sun and the flowers never turned their faces to the sky. There, love had been poisoned by envy. The village was small and quiet. Not in the way of peace, but of weariness. People glanced over their shoulders when they laughed. Doors closed quickly. Smiles flickered and vanished before they could take shape. At the heart of the village lived a woman named Ismene. She was beautiful, of that, there was no doubt. Her hair fell in silver coils, her eyes sharp as quartz, her voice smooth as oil. But the love around her was stunted. People feared her favor and craved her approval, like thirsty flowers stretching toward a sun that never truly warmed them. I watched from a distance. Each morning, Ismene walked the village square. Wherever she passed, women lowered their eyes and men straightened their backs. She said little, but her silence held power. Her approval was a treasure, her disdain a wound. And oh, how she watched the others. Every new bride, every laughing child, every gentle touch between friends. Her eyes followed those moments like a hawk. She did not want them to stop. She wanted to be needed for them to begin. One night, I entered her garden. She had built it herself, rows of roses in impossible hues, each bred to bloom longer than nature intended. But they had no scent. Their beauty was precise, controlled, lifeless. I sat among them and whispered softly, not curses, truth. The petals began to tremble. The next day, a child named Eli ran through the square, laughing. He chased a dog, his arms full of wildflowers, his cheeks painted with joy. His laughter bounced like a stone across a quiet pond. Ismene turned to look, and something changed. A petal dropped from her sleeve. She clenched her hand around it, frowning, then walked quickly home. That night, I entered her dreams. Not to frighten her, to show her. She saw herself as a girl, standing in a doorway, watching her mother braid her sister's hair. She reached out, but no one turned. She called out, but no one heard. And in that moment, the seed was planted. If I cannot be loved, I will be admired. Ismene wept in her sleep. When she awoke, her mirror was shattered. No thief, no storm, just cracks, shaped like vines. And for the first time in years, she walked outside without her lacquered smile. She sat in the square, beneath the sun, and watched the children. She did not correct them. She did not offer advice. She simply sat a day, quiet, listening. A young woman, once afraid to speak near her, offered her a fig. Ismene took it. The sky felt softer that day. I left soon after, but not before planting a real rose in her garden. It was not large, not rare, just red and warm and fragrant. It would not bloom forever, but when it did, it would remind her that admiration is a mask, and love does not bloom in the shadow of fear. Envy is a thorn, but even a thorn grows from longing, and longing, too, deserves light. I crossed the sea on a breeze that tasted of salt and pine, letting the gulls guide me past jagged cliffs and foamy bays. My feet touched shore on a quiet island wrapped in mist, where time moved slowly and even the waves seemed to hush themselves before speaking. No one remembered its name. The people didn't speak of it, nor of where they came from. They toiled in their gardens, mended their roofs, fed their goats and children with quiet devotion. Their lives were orderly, clean, efficient. But there were no stories. No music drifted from their windows. No poems scratched into walls. No lovers carved initials into bark. The children played, but only games of rules, never imagination. No one painted. No one danced. It was not sorrowful, but it was silent, in a way that unsettled me. I watched them for days. A girl named Sailor worked in the olive grove, alone. Her eyes were sharp, her hands strong, but she moved like a clock, exact, careful, detached. When others passed, she nodded, but never smiled. And yet, one evening, I saw her standing at the cliff's edge. She held a smooth stone and whispered something to the wind before letting it fall into the waves. The next morning, I visited the place where the stone had dropped. And there, half buried in sea foam, I found a name carved into another stone. Thelia, no surname. No dates. Just the name. Etched in trembling lines. A memory, nearly lost. That night, I followed Sailor in spirit, silent and invisible. She returned to a small cottage and took from beneath her bed a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were scraps of fabric stitched together with thread the color of sky, and on each patch, a symbol, a flower, a pair of joined hands, a bird with open wings. Memories. Unspoken. I knew then, this was a people who had lost not only their name, but their story. Whether by grief, exile, or something darker, they had chosen to forget. To erase. To survive without remembering. But love cannot thrive in forgetting. So I began to walk their paths in twilight, when the world straddles dream and waking. I whispered names into leaves. I stirred scents into the wind, rosemary, honey, wine. I brushed fingertips across doorframes, leaving behind feelings no one could explain. The urge to hum, the pull of tears, the warmth of being held. And slowly, the island stirred. A child picked up a rock and drew shapes in the dirt, an eye, a star, a heart. An elder began to hum without knowing why. Sailor returned to the cliff and spoke the name aloud. Thelia. The moment the word left her mouth, she collapsed into the grass, sobbing. Grief poured out like a dam bursting, but so did love. The next day, she brought her quilt to the square. She laid it out and told the others about each piece. About Thelia. About laughter and peaches and dancing on wet stones. No one interrupted. When she finished, an old man brought a flute from his attic. A woman brought a song she barely remembered. That night, the island sang. Not loudly, but clearly. I left before dawn, gliding across the waves like mist. I did not need to stay, because they had remembered. And love, once remembered, does not fade again. Not truly. It lives in the telling. Beyond the olive hills and past the orchards of golden figs, there was a lone cottage with ivy running wild across its walls. I found it while following a bluebird's song. A melody so sad and so hopeful that I couldn't help but be drawn to it. A man lived there. His name was Calix, and he spoke to no one but the wind. Each morning he climbed the small hill behind his home. He sat with a book in his lap, unread, and stared out over the empty road leading east. He never missed a day. Rain, sun, frost, it didn't matter. His eyes searched the horizon like a sailor looking for land. I watched him for weeks. He was not old, but there were lines at his eyes that spoke of many seasons past. His hands were strong, though idle, always holding something. A letter, a locket, sometimes just his own wrist, like he was reminding himself to stay still. The villagers whispered about him when they passed. He's waiting for her. She left years ago. He still thinks she'll return. They shook their heads with pity. Some called it foolish. Others, tragic. But I saw something they did not. Love still lit him like a lamp. I visited him in a dream. He sat on his hill, the wind playing through his dark curls. I appeared beside him, not radiant or glowing, but simple, human, curious. He didn't flinch. I know who you are, he said softly, without looking at me. Do you? I asked. He smiled, just barely. You've been walking the edge of my dreams for a while now. Always just out of reach. Why do you wait? I asked him. Even when the world moves on. His hands tightened slightly on his knees. Because she mattered. And because what I gave her wasn't a bargain. It wasn't a trade. It was a gift. Silence wrapped around us. A bird called once, then went quiet. I don't know if she'll ever come back, he continued, voice thick with truth. But I know who I was when I loved her. And that part of me, that's still worth sitting with. I leaned my head on his shoulder. He didn't startle. He just closed his eyes. When I left the dream, I touched the soil beneath his chair and planted something there. The next morning, as the sun rose, Calix climbed the hill again. And for the first time, a blossom greeted him. Not just any flower, a rare kind, with pale petals and a deep crimson center. A flower once sacred in temples to me. A flower that blooms where unwavering love takes root. He smiled and whispered, "So, you heard me after all." I did. But I hadn't come to end his waiting. I'd come to honor it. Because not all love ends with a kiss, or with reunion. Some loves endure like stone warmed by the sun. And that, too, is sacred. Before I left, I carved a line into the tree at the base of his hill. Even unanswered, love is still real. I heard him laugh the next day, and I knew he was no longer only waiting. He was remembering, too. And that, sometimes, is the gentlest kind of healing. After leaving the quiet hill where Calix waited, I traveled to a place whispered about in shadows and hope, a garden said to hold the power to heal broken hearts. It was not a garden of roses or lilies, but of roots tangled beneath the earth, where forgiveness took seed. The garden was tended by an old woman named Myrine. Her hands were knotted like the branches of an ancient olive tree, and her eyes sparkled with the wisdom of many years. She greeted me without surprise, as if she had been expecting me. "Why do you come, child of foam and light?" she asked softly. "I seek to understand love's full circle," I replied. "Not just passion or longing, but how hearts mend after pain." She nodded and led me through winding paths lined with plants bearing unusual fruits, some sweet, some bitter, others sour. "Forgiveness is the soil in which love's roots grow deep," Myrine said. "But it is not easy to cultivate. It demands patience and courage." We came to a clearing where a tree stood alone, its bark scarred and weathered. "This tree was once broken by fire," she said. "But it forgave the flames and grew stronger." I placed my hand on the tree's rough trunk and felt warmth spread through me. Myrine told stories of villagers who had lost everything to anger and regret, yet found peace in forgiving themselves and others. "Love is not always a bright flame," she said. "Sometimes it is a quiet ember, glowing steadily beneath the ash." That night, under a sky heavy with stars, I sat beside Myrine. She offered me a fruit from the garden, a small, unassuming berry. "Eat," she said. "And remember, to forgive is to free the heart." I tasted the berry, and memories flooded me of quarrels mended, of hands reached out in apology, of tears shared in silence. I understood then that forgiveness is not forgetting, but choosing love over pain. Before I left, I planted a seed from the garden near the edge of the village, a promise that love can heal even the deepest wounds, if only given time and care. As I walked away, the garden seemed to sigh, and I felt its blessing follow me like a gentle breeze. After the Garden of Forgiveness, I traveled to a bustling town nestled between rolling hills and flowing rivers. Unlike the grand temples and shining palaces I had visited before, this place was simple and unassuming, but alive with a different kind of warmth. Here, love was not spoken in sonnets or declared with grand gestures. It was woven quietly, stitch by stitch, like the tapestries made by the village weavers. I met two women, Leda and Meris, who had been friends since childhood. They shared a small home by the river's edge, where their laughter mingled with the water's song and their days were full of shared work and small kindnesses. Leda was a weaver, her fingers nimble and sure. Meris was a gardener, her hands always rich with soil and the scent of blooming flowers. One afternoon, I watched them work side by side. Leda wove threads of deep blue and gold, while Meris tended her garden nearby. Their lives were intertwined not by passion or desire, but by steady presence and quiet care. When a storm swept through the town, flooding the riverbank, Meris's garden was damaged. Leda stayed by her side, helping replant and rebuild, offering her strength without a word. At night, they shared stories and dreams beneath the stars, their bond deepening not in grand declarations but in everyday moments of support and understanding. I realized then that friendship is a form of love. One that endures seasons, weathers storms, and grows stronger with time. Before I left, I gifted them a small charm, a woven heart made of silver and thread, to remind them that their love, though quiet, was powerful and true. As I walked away, the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the town. I carried with me the lesson that love's foundation is often built not in fireworks, but in the steady light of friendship. I found myself traveling along a winding river that gleamed like silver under the sun. Along its banks, families gathered to say goodbye. Their faces were marked with sorrow, but also with hope, a delicate balance I have come to understand well. Among them was a young couple, Elara and Dorian. They had lived all their lives in the same village, their love a quiet flame nurtured by shared dreams and whispered secrets. But now, Dorian was called away by duty to distant lands, and the promise of separation hung heavy in the air. I watched as Elara pressed a small charm into Dorian's palm, a tiny carved dove. "For your safe return," she said, her voice trembling. He smiled, though his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "And for your heart to wait for me." Their farewell was tender, marked by lingering touches and the softest of promises. As the days passed, Elara tended her garden, watching the horizon for signs of Dorian's return. Her love was steadfast, woven with patience and quiet strength. One evening, beneath a canopy of stars, she whispered into the wind, "Come back to me." I sensed the river's song carrying her words far and wide, wrapping them in hope. Months later, as the sun dipped low, Dorian returned, weary but alive. Elara ran to him, their embrace a testament to the power of love that endures absence. I smiled, knowing that love's true strength often reveals itself in waiting, not in possession, but in trust. Before I left, I placed a single white flower on the riverbank, a symbol of reunion and the promise that love, though tested by distance, can bloom anew. As I continued my journey, I carried with me the lesson that sometimes, love means letting go, trusting the heart to find its way back home. I traveled to a quiet valley where wildflowers carpeted the earth and the air was thick with the hum of bees. There, I found a mother named Talia, whose love for her child was like the earth itself, steady, giving, and full of quiet strength. Talia's son, Nico, was small and curious, with eyes that held the wonder of the world. From dawn to dusk, she tended to him with gentle hands, teaching him the songs of birds, the names of plants, and the stories whispered by the wind. But love, I learned, was not only softness. One afternoon, a storm gathered over the valley. The wind tore at the trees, and lightning split the sky. Talia shielded Nico beneath her cloak, her arms fierce as a lioness's. "I will protect you," she vowed, her voice steady despite the howling gale. As the storm passed, I saw how love could be both tenderness and courage, a shield forged in the heart's fire. In the evenings, Talia sang lullabies that wrapped Nico in warmth and safety, her voice a beacon in the dark. Watching them, I understood a love that asks no return, that sacrifices without question, and that grows stronger in the face of challenge. Before I departed, I planted a tree near their home, a sturdy oak whose roots would grow deep, a symbol of the enduring bond between mother and child. As I walked away, I carried with me the knowledge that love is both gentle and fierce, and that the heart of a mother holds the world. One evening, I wandered into a lively marketplace filled with the scent of spices, the laughter of children, and the clatter of coins. Among the crowd, I noticed a brief moment, two strangers exchanging a glance that lasted just a heartbeat but spoke volumes. He was a traveler, weary from the road, with eyes that held stories untold. She was a merchant's daughter, her smile shy but genuine, hidden beneath a veil of curiosity. Their eyes met near a stall of bright fruits. Neither spoke, but in that fleeting moment, a silent conversation bloomed, a spark of recognition, of something precious and ephemeral. As the crowd pressed in, they drifted apart, each carrying the memory of that glance like a secret treasure. I followed the traveler to a quiet inn, where he sat by the fire, replaying the moment in his mind. The merchant's daughter returned to her home, her cheeks flushed with the warmth of possibility. I realized then that love is not always a grand tale or a lifelong bond. Sometimes, it is a fleeting touch, a shared breath between two souls passing in the night. Before I left the marketplace, I scattered petals from my own garden, a gentle blessing on their paths, a whisper that some loves, however brief, leave echoes that never fade. As I vanished into the evening mist, I smiled, knowing that even the smallest connection carries the power to awaken hearts. In a secluded glen where wildflowers bloomed untamed, I found a young woman named Calianera. She sat by a crystal-clear pool, staring into the water's surface as if seeking answers from the depths below. Her eyes were heavy with doubt, and her shoulders bore the weight of judgment, both from others and from herself. "Why do you look so sorrowful?" I asked softly as I approached. She startled, then smiled faintly. "I do not recognize the face I see." I knelt beside her and traced the outline of her reflection. "Tell me, what do you see?" "A stranger," she whispered. "Flawed, unworthy, hidden beneath masks." I took her hand in mine and said, "Love is not only for others. It begins here." I touched her chest gently, "within your own heart." Together, we gazed into the water, and I showed her visions. Not of perfection, but of strength, resilience, and beauty woven through her scars and struggles. "Self-love is a quiet flame," I told her. "It does not demand applause or perfection. It asks only for kindness." Calianera smiled, tears catching the sunlight. "How do I keep this love alive?" "By forgiving your flaws, embracing your story, and speaking gently to your soul." I left her by the pool, her reflection now calm and radiant. As I walked away, I carried with me the reminder that before we give love to others, we must first learn to love ourselves. Far beyond the bustling cities and the quiet villages, I traveled to a mountain village battered by cold winds and harsh winters. There, I met a blacksmith named Eric's, whose forge burned bright even in the deepest snow. Eric's hands were calloused and strong, but it was the fire in his heart that captivated me. He labored day and night, shaping iron into tools and weapons to protect his people. One winter, a fierce blizzard struck, cutting off the village from the world. Supplies ran low, spirits dipped, but Eric's kept his forge alive, his flame a beacon of hope. "I carry more than metal," he said once, as sparks flew from his anvil. "I carry the will to endure." His love for his village was fierce and unyielding, forged through hardship and sacrifice. I watched as neighbors gathered around his fire, finding warmth and courage to face the storm. His flame never flickered, even when the winds howled. Before I left, I gifted him a small ember from my own heart, a symbol of resilience and the power to keep loving even when the world is cold. As I descended the mountain, I felt the strength of love tested and proven, a fire that burns brightest when nourished by courage. The sea was calling me again. Always the sea. Its endless horizon, its ceaseless song, its eternal embrace. I returned to the place of my birth, where the waves whispered secrets of time and hearts, and the foam from which I was born still shimmered under the morning sun like scattered jewels. Standing at the edge of the shore, I let the cool water lap around my feet, each tide brushing away the footprints I left behind, as if to remind me that love itself moves, shifts, and renews. The wind was soft, carrying with it the scent of salt and wildflowers, and above me, the sky stretched wide and endless, a canvas for dreams and hopes alike. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the pulse of the ocean echoing through me, a heartbeat older than the stars. In that moment, the memories of all the lives I had touched floated before me like shimmering reflections on the water's surface. There was Calix, the tender youth who taught me the power of healing love. The way forgiveness can mend even the deepest wounds, turning bitterness into grace. I saw his gentle smile and the garden we nurtured together, where flowers bloomed in colors I had never imagined. I thought of Leda and Meris, whose friendship was a quiet flame that warmed their days, reminding me that love is often found in steadfast presence and simple acts of care. Their laughter, their shared silences, the woven threads of their lives, these were threads I carry with me still. Ilara's steadfast waiting for Dorian by the river's edge appeared next in my mind's eye, the promise of reunion and faith in love's endurance despite distance. Their story whispered to me that sometimes love means letting go, trusting the heart to find its way back home through shadow and light. And then there was Talia, the mother whose love was both gentle and fierce, an unyielding shield against the storm. Her lullabies carried through the valley like soft winds, her arms a sanctuary for her child. In her love, I saw the strength that nurtures life itself. I remembered the brief, bright glance between the traveler and the merchant's daughter in the marketplace, love's fleeting spark that leaves a lasting echo in the soul, even when paths diverge. That moment taught me that not all love must last forever to be profound. Calianera, who looked into the mirror and learned to embrace her own reflection, showed me the deepest love of all, self-acceptance. Her tears and smiles became a testament to the quiet, steady flame that nurtures the soul from within. Finally, there was Eric's, the blacksmith who stoked the fire of hope through the harshest winter. His unbroken spirit and the forge's warm glow reminded me that love can be a fierce flame, burning brightest against the coldest darkness. Each story, each love, was a wave in the ocean, unique and yet part of the whole, rising and falling, shaping the shores of my being. Love is not a single, simple thing. It is many things. It is passion's bright fire and friendship's steady warmth. It is the pain of parting and the joy of reunion. It is a mother's fierce protection and a stranger's fleeting kindness. It is the courage to forgive and the bravery to accept oneself. Love is the soft lullaby that carries you to sleep, the unspoken promise whispered beneath the stars, the spark that ignites 1,000 hearts. As I stood there, watching the waves dance in endless rhythm, I understood that love, true love, is vast, infinite, and eternal, like the sea itself. And yet, love is also intimate and personal. It lives in each touch, each glance, each whispered word. It is a story told in millions of voices, each one different, yet all connected by the same invisible thread. I knelt by the shore and dipped my hand into the cool, shimmering water. The sea flowed through my fingers, cold and alive. I smiled, feeling that same eternal pulse in my own heart. With a deep breath, I gathered handfuls of the foam, white and light as clouds, and watched them melt back into the water. I understood then that love, like the sea, is ever-changing, sometimes calm and soothing, sometimes wild and tempestuous. But always, always, it returns. I whispered a blessing to the winds, sending it out to every corner of the world, the blessing of love's many faces. To those who are longing, may love find you gently. To those who are healing, may forgiveness light your way. To those who wait, may hope never fade. To those who have lost love, may your hearts find new dawns. And to all, may you know the deepest truth I have learned. Love is not just the passion sung by poets or the desire that sets hearts aflame. It is also the quiet courage to give, to forgive, to endure. It is the strength to be vulnerable and the grace to heal. It is the light that guides us home, no matter how far we roam. As the sun dipped low, casting golden streaks across the waves, I turned away from the sea, carrying its endless song within me. I am Aphrodite. Born of foam, but more than foam. I am the keeper of love's many forms, the guardian of hearts both broken and whole. And as the night wrapped the world in its gentle embrace, I closed my eyes, allowing the lullaby of the waves to carry me softly into dreams. The story of love is never-ending, and so, too, is mine. Thank you for listening to this light story. If you enjoyed this lovely tale, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Light Story Club will be here for when you want to listen to another chronicle to help you rest. Goodbye for now.